Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be doing a weekly meta breakdown for the best decks in Standard, best of 3, traditional Standard, but we're going to double focus with the fact that this weekend is the qualifier play-in for MTG Arena, and it is Standard. So there's a qualifier play-in and then the actual qualifier. So both are best of 3. Friday will be the best of 3 qualifier play-in, and then the qualifier weekend is this weekend. So we're going to cover the best decks, best options you can take for the weekend. As always, we're predominantly going to get the data from UntapedGG, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates win rates from yourself and other users. This is a whole bunch of cool stats and trends for the meta itself. Link is for Untaps in the description. I'll link all these deck lists, so don't worry about it. You can copy and paste to your heart's content. And as always, with qualifier weekends, if you have a good run, drop a list in the comments. Let us know what you're playing and what's doing well for you. I'll also be likely competing in the Pizza Box Open Jankathon, which is a $2,500 kind of tournament of tournament champions. So I will be playing, and I'll kind of give you a hint as to what I'll be playing, but most of you who follow the channel probably already know what I'm going to be playing, but we'll kind of go from there. So looking at popularity to start off with, in terms of popularity of the week, things you'll see most likely on the ladder and things that folks most likely will take. Diamond and Mythic rank, and 4-color control being the most popular deck right now at 17% of the meta, followed closely by Golgari Midrange at 15.5. We have Soldiers just a shade under 10%, Mono Red about 8%, Bant Control 5.3, Esper Legends 5.3, Sultai Control, which is a deck Crokies has been playing. I think it's a case of Crokies is doing really well with it, but most folks are not doing as well with it at the 47% that we see there for the day. And then lastly, the mono white humans are kind of mono white aggro deck. What might be getting aggregated in terms of the overall percentage is the difference between like the Esper Legends and Esper Midrange decks. There's an overlap in the cards that both those decks play, but they are slightly different decks. So we'll cover both variations of what you can expect in that regard. And then just kind of looking at the trends in terms of the decks themselves, we've largely seen since like October, Golgari get replaced by the Ramp deck as the most prominent. Ramp's peaked as high as 24%, and we've had Golgari kind of closely tied to it. We've seen Mono Red peak at about 13, kind of fall down, while Soldiers has kind of replaced it as like the aggro deck of choice. And then just kind of your Esper Legends decks, peaks around the World Championship time. And then Bant Control, since the deck was kind of introduced, we see kind of playing around. Dimir Midrange largely has fallen off in place of the Esper variant. So looking at it, we'll go to Azorius Soldiers first. They're at 61%. And we've seen slight variations with the deck, but kind of the core of this, less focused on like your lords and playing more of a kind of a tempo-oriented game. You have things like Luminarch Veteran in here that gains you a bunch of life. Kind of a cool interaction is you have things like Resolute Reinforcements with Flash, the Zephyr Sentinel with Flash, Werewolf Bodyguard with Flash, and then you also kind of have in here Make Disappears, Protect the Negotiators. So your opponent never really knows, are you going to counter something or are you going to flash in a threat? This is really helpful against the matchups that are looking to sweep you, because you can always have kind of counter spells to protect in that respect. Also, kind of a cool thing with Zephyr Sentinels, you can reset your creatures. So you can rebuy Resolute Reinforcements, either if they're trying to remove it or stuff like that, or just kind of reset the effect. Same with like Knight Errant of Eos, can provide you card advantage with drawing cards and then put it back in your hand and then draw cards again. So kind of a cool little instance there. Version's playing a single copy of Virtue of Loyalty, the wedding announcements, and then just your kind of core Soldiers features, Recruitment Officer, Yodian, Harbin as kind of the over-the-top effect. A lot of useful utility lands between Fortified Beachhead and Myrex as well, so you can kind of pass go and then pump your team as well. Notable, the Werefox as well as the wedding announcements are not Soldiers. Sideboard, you have like a bunch of removal, Elspeth Smite, Destroy Evil, very helpful for big things, as well as enchantments, Leyline Mining, stuff of that nature. Lantern Flare is more removal, more counter spells. With Protected Negotiators, Tusk is welcome for the heavy removal-based matchups, just especially good against like Golgari. Sweepers just provide you some card advantage. The creature mirrors, you have like Werefox. Now, notably with Werefox as well, important pointing out this effect, the last few ones, Brutal Cathar, Skyclave Apparition, specifically mention opponent's creature. Werefoxes up to one other target non-fox creature. So unfortunately, in your Zerda Tribal, it's not going to work, but here it will, where you can exile one of your own creatures under it. So if they sweep or kill it, then you get your other creature back, maybe resetting like an ETB or something. And then you have Wandering Emperors in here as another kind of stickier threat against like either bigger creatures. You could exile things coming in, makes you go tokens, just a useful card that doesn't get hit by sweepers right away. From there, we go to 4-color control, 58.5%, and this is the Reduke special. So this one's kind of like Abzan variant, and you have briefcases to get you going. Up the Beanstalk is a card that's being played in a lot more of these lists. We see 2 in the main, 1 in the side, helps in the mirror. Just cycling your leyline bindings now, draw cards, all sorts of effect. Beans is being played all over the various formats, especially in extended formats. You ramp ahead, your kind of payoffs are your Atraxa, Herd Migrations, Hardcast Virtue, kicking Archangels kind of mixed into there, but sweepers, cheap removal, and then big bombs on the top end. Hand Hate in the side, just an assortment of removals, counter spells where needed, grind your elements, Chrome Host, when your opponent kind of scales out their removal, they can bring in the Seed Sharks, seeing some knockout blows, and Baloths, both as respect more of the aggressive decks. Baloth's also really nice if your opponent has Liliana, that old interaction where they force you to discard and you get Baloth into play for free. Moving on, we go to Bant Control, 55%. So this is Greg Orange list and another Beanstalk deck. So this is predominantly a blue-white deck, splashing green for Beanstalk, as well as Broker's Charm. And then you're leveraging the Triomes here to give you more instances of planes, as well as your other domain effects. So you could play Leyline Binding, which then triggers the Beanstalk. It also allows you to have Laydown Arms. That's a scalable removal spell by having a higher number of planes, while also playing dual lands. March and Syncopate could both be overcast. So if say even if you only need Syncopate for 1, you could Syncopate and cast it for 5, and then draw a card, for example. Just counter spells, you're winning with the Emperor or Hornlock Whale for the most part, or the Sunfall tokens, and then a single copy of Myrex. Again, we're seeing a very similar theme in these sideboards. Removal, counters where needed for like the bigger mana decks, respect to aggro in certain instances, Chrome Host Seed Shark, good in the when they kind of scale out removal, take out sweepers, stuff of that nature. Grindier games, you have Deluge, and then counterspell battles, Hullbreaker, and Eternal Wander can kind of overtake a game as well. You then go to Golgari Midrange, 54%. And this is kind of the grindy mid-range deck of the format. Lots of different removal options, cut downs, go for the throats. Liliana Minus can also work here. The Virtues, this version is on the Blossoming Tortoise that helps you kind of ramp ahead. See Skitter as a go wide, so kind of a split Graveyard Trespasser Skitter. Both attack the graveyard in different ways. Skitter also helps play around other Lilianas by creating a token. The Iron Crag helps you ramp up early to get some of your big threats, and then Glissa is just a powerful effect. Really tough to deal with in combat, and then provides a bunch of utility, notably the Destroy Enchantment. It's all these Leyline Bindings, or like your opponent hard casting Virtue, for example. Mosswood Dread Knight, really sticky effect. Obviously Shieldred, very powerful card, and then the Nissa's finally seeing play actually. The card's very powerful, but just need to find the right home. You have Mishra's Foundry and Restless Cottage as creature lands that both get cost reduction to activate from the Tortoise, and then also get a bonus in terms of power. Similar again, extra removal, cut downs, Path to Peril for the aggressive decks, Pilfer for Hand Hate, another Liliana for the grindier matchups, Phyrexian Arena as a way to get card advantage, Tranquil Fallback as a way to just really flexible card, gain you some life, blow up an enchantment, deal with the graveyard. The End can deal with like any, your opponent's Shieldred, some of the bigger threats, Planeswalkers. If your opponent's like on Esper Control and they only have Wandering Emperors, well, deal with those Wandering Emperors, deal with Atraxa. And then Gix Command, nice little sweeper style effect, a lot of utility in this card as well. Then move to Esper Legends. This is a Legends variant, so this is what won Worlds, but kind of a core, similar to the deck that we've seen quite a few different variations of, but the deck's built around Rafine, conniving, drawing new cards, throwing things. There's a bunch of legendaries in the deck, and you are leveraging those legendaries through things like Plaza Hero or a bunch of utility lands in the channel lands, which early game are lands, but late game are spells. Really good curves of like Skrelv into Denic or Thalia into Rafine. And then these versions are playing things like Fairy Mastermind for card advantage, especially in the mirrors. 3-1 split between Go for the Throat and Make Disappear. And then you have like your Urtais and Lord Skitters in there as well. Sideboard, just early removal options, some counterspell options, and grindier matchups. You have the Wedding Announcements, and then AO for the non-exile based removal decks provides you some utility. Really good against, like, for example, the Golgari deck, where you can get some value even when it dies. I'm just going to show off like one instance of the Esper Midrange decks. So you'll notice like similarity in these with like things like the Lord Skitters, the Sheoldreds, the Denics, as well as the Rafines, but you're fewer on like the Thalias and some of those other effects. Higher number of non-creature spells, Go for the Throats, full set of Virtue of Loyalty. We have Make Disappears and then Cut Downs, as well as Wedding Announcements and the Wandering Emperor. A little bit more of a mid-range oriented deck. Sideboard lets you shift into, depending whatever type of role, you can shift up into control to be more mid-range focused. Really just allows you to attack them how you want. So this deck has a lot of flexibility, where Legends is a little bit more one note. Sweepers with like Farewell, counter spells with negates, disdainful strokes, destroy evils, smites, cut downs, knowing with affliction, a whole bunch of goodies kind of scattered into the deck itself. So we go from there. Just want to share a couple from MTGO results. If you do want to play the enchantment decks, we've seen them here and there. This is a list that recently came out, 3-1 in the most recent standard challenge or preliminary. So you still have your Catilda, Spirited Companion, Generous Visitors, Jukais, no Calyx, anything like that. Full Hallowed Haunting variant of the deck, Restorations, Teachings, Ossifications, but the decks are playing Virtue of Loyalty as well here. Just another way to make tokens, another enchantment as well. Rite of Harmony and Seed of Hope in here. Notably with Rite of Harmony, on your upkeep, you can enter full control, cast the Harmony, and then whenever your sagas flip over for that turn, you get to draw cards that way as well. Commune of Spirits, so more of a mid-range oriented version as opposed to what you typically see in Best of One, which is more creature-based and more aggressive. Sideboards, which is more card draw, Catilda's and Circle Climbers for aggressive decks, heavier removal decks, you have Wedding Announcements, Knockout Blows, Destroy Evils, and Stone Brains. Hey, if your opponent's playing Farewell, you know what you want to name in your enchantment deck? Farewell. Or Atraxa, stuff of that nature can kind of come in there. And then we have two other decks I wanted to show. Mono White. So this is similar to Soldiers in a way, but less tempo oriented, just more linear aggro. So your Thalias, Adelins, Brutal Cathars, Intrepid Adversaries, Hopeful Initiates. Kind of see some Steel Seraphs in this version, as well as like Phyrexian Vindicator, good in the mono red matchup, in like the creature based damage. Copper Coats, Spellbook Vendors, Ossifications in here. So just kind of like very linear, aggressive, Fateful Absence, Wedding Announcements in here. So just some removal. Wedding Announcements useful. In the grindier matchups, the Phyrexian Vindicator, just more copies on the side for the aggressive decks. Smite, and then like Invasion of Gobokan is kind of a pseudo Thoughtseize. So there's that deck, and then there's a few different versions of mono red, but it's not like definitive list. I'm going to be playing mono red most likely in the tournament, like 99% sure, just because it's the one I'm most familiar with. But typically you're seeing like Swiss Spears, Bloodthirsties. The Voldaren Aperture is actually an interesting one here. But most of the decks are on like one Felden now, 3-3 split between Godric and Squee, Kumanos, and then kind of the varying numbers are like Play with Fire is seeing varied degree of like the numbers that it's seeing play. Monstrous Rage is kind of a flex card. The Witchstalker Frenzy sometimes can be Nahiri's Warcrafting, so that all kind of varies. And then most of the lists now, for the most part, are playing 23 lands in a 2-3 split between Sokazens, as well as the Mishra's Foundries. And then in the sideboard, we have things like Vampire's Vengeance, which can be used as like a sweeper for like the kind of go wide decks, stuff of that nature. Or Brass Forge is a card I like against heavy removal based decks. This one's not featuring it, but a lot of the decks are doing like a 2/2 Jaya and Koth. That's likely where I'm going to be kind of situated with. Some numbers of, like, you can kind of play around with these numbers. Lithomantic Barrage, Torch the Tower, and Barrage are kind of for the same matchups for the most part, so having just access to the 5 damage options might be better. And then playing some number of Twisted Fealties is a reasonable approach in the bigger mana decks, just stealing like their bigger blockers or stuff out of the way that way. So I'll link these with MTGO. You can take a look. There's a lot of decks here. Like there's this Gruul deck that went 5-0, but it's the only time I've ever seen this Gruul deck 5-0. So wouldn't like for the ladder it's fine, but I wouldn't go to like a bigger tournament with an unproven deck of that nature. But let me know what you think. Good luck to those competing, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.